Yo, what's going on guys? Welcome to this mini camera basics course where I want to take you from zero to cinematic hero. Regardless whether you're just starting out and know absolutely nothing or you're just trying to brush up your skills, these videos will guide you through everything you need to know to become a self-sufficient content creator, going from buying a camera to hitting export. In today's video, we're going to dive into exposure, one of the most crucial parts of filming content. We'll be talking about what it is, the exposure triangle, and understanding white balance. So exposure is the term used to describe how bright or dark an image is. So to control this, you can add or take away light, or you'll modify the settings within the exposure triangle. The exposure triangle consists of three elements: ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. And each of these elements almost have a dual purpose within. Shutter speed is almost as it sounds, the speed in which the shutter closes. The two things this controls is light and motion blur. When taking a photo, think of the shutter speed like the blink of an eye. The faster you blink your eye, the less light is going to come in, and the less motion blur there'll be. The slower you blink, the more light is going to come in and the slower the action will be. For example, at 1/250th of a second, your video is going to be very crispy. As you can see, it's very clear and looks almost unnatural because this is so much higher than what our eyes usually see. Compared to at 1/10th of a second, there's a lot more motion blur, but the image is brighter. How do you know what shutter speed to choose? We'll get into that in the next video, but for now, know that it'll be double your frame rate. Your ISO controls your camera's sensitivity to the light. It appears to be darkening or brightening your image on screen, but what it's actually doing is changing the sensitivity your camera sensor has to the light. The more sensitive it is, the brighter the image is. The caveat with this though is that each camera has a base, the best performing level. And the more you push past this base, the more noise that is introduced to the shot. So ideally, granted it's not always possible, you want to try and keep your ISO as close to the base as possible and then change other factors within the exposure triangle. Aperture, also known as f-stop, is more to do with the lens in the camera, but it's essentially how wide the diaphragm of the lens is opening up. You'll see it next to the focal length on a lens, whether that's f1.4, 2.8, maybe it's a variable aperture, 3.5 to 5.6. All this means is how wide the diaphragm is going to open up. The lower the aperture number, the wider you can open up the lens. The higher the aperture number, the more it closes down. Just like an eye, the more you open your eyes, the more light is going to come in. The more you close down your eyes, the less light is going to come in. However, the aperture has a second function which also controls what's known as the depth of field. So looking at this from a top-down point of view, the lower the aperture number, the more light that can come in, yes, but the smaller the plane of focus. So here at 1.4, I'm in focus and the background is super blurry. If I was to step back just a bit, I'm already out of focus. So an aperture being this wide open, this line of focus is very, very thin. Whereas if I close down my aperture to f16, there's a hell of a lot more in focus, but the image is now darker. So a closed down aperture means a higher plane of focus, but a darker image. A very wide aperture lets in a lot more light, but the plane of focus is a lot thinner. And that is the exposure triangle. So if your image is too dark and you need more light and you can't bring in external light, you want to widen out your aperture, try stopping down. You want to slow down your shutter speed, not too low so you create motion blur, but low enough. Or you want to raise your ISO. If it's too bright, you want to do the opposite. Now we'll get onto white balance, and this controls how your camera sees the light in the scene. And as it says, it balances the white. Our eyes adjust automatically to it, but our cameras don't. Light temperature is all about how warm or cool the light is. And really, it's all based on the timing of the sun. The most common light temperatures are 2500 Kelvin. This is your tungsten light, most house lamps, street lamps, the sun rising or sun setting. Then we have 5600 Kelvin. This is your daylight balance light. General white light, and where the sun is during most of the day. And lastly, we have 7000 Kelvin, which is super cool, almost blue light that gives that midnight look. So depending on the white balance you set your camera to will determine how your camera perceives the white. If you set your camera's white balance as the same as the light source, regardless of what color that light source is to our eyes, your camera will register that as white. So to be able to see those different temperatures of the light, you'd have to have a different white balance setting in your camera. So to see warm light, make sure the Kelvin temperature on your camera is higher than the light source. To see a cooler light, make sure the Kelvin number on your camera is lower than the light source. Loads of cameras do a great job at auto white balance, but it's always better to try and dial it in yourself, because if it's not correct, it kind of does ruin your image. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any questions at all, please drop them in the comments down below. But with that being said, if you got a lesson, laugh, or light bulb moment from this video, I'd really appreciate if you drop a like down below. And if you're feeling extra nice, you could hit the subscribe button. But with that being said, I will catch you in the next one. See ya.